This is Johnny Phillips with Junior Achievement of New Jersey. We prepare and inspire students to succeed in the global economy.
Hi, I'm Marion Oneill. I work at Public Service Enterprise Group, more commonly known as Public Service Electric and Gas Company, and I am the manager of contributions in our corporate responsibility department.
Marion, I want to thank you for taking the time to stop and do a fireside chat with me today and share some insight for some of our students, anyone who's looking to start their careers or looking into the future. Hopefully we can use your insight as some reference, right? As we start, do you mind describing or sharing your job story? Meaning, what do you do for a living, why you choose to do it?
So I am the manager of contributions, as I mentioned, and I am very fortunate actually to have the job that I have. I get to work with nonprofits throughout the state. I get to work with our employees. My job is varied. So on a day-to-day basis, I might be working on a governance issue with the corporate secretary. I might be working on a pledge sheet issue with our finance team, or a nonprofit organization like Junior Achievement, whether it's on program development. We support events for our senior management. We support the board, nonprofit board program. So as you can see, I think it's any number of, we just have such a diverse number of activities and responsibilities. And I've been in my position a pretty long time, but despite that, I've had an opportunity to do, it has grown. It hasn't necessarily, it's not stagnant. You're constantly working with people. You feel good about what you do, working to improve New Jersey and life for all its citizens.
Thanks. We work with PSEG pretty closely, so we know the work that you guys do is really impactful for the community in terms of meeting their needs and listening to what they have to say in terms of your business. So I think if you can explain just a little more in depth on what your role would actually do, because when students see a title, they don't necessarily understand all the nuances, all the little things that go into your responsibilities. So maybe if you can explain what you do with these companies and what you do with the nonprofits in terms of events and philanthropy and contributions.
All right, so I'll back up a little bit. Working in the philanthropic sector, keep in mind I work in a corporation for the philanthropic sector, right? Unlike Junior Achievement, which is a nonprofit in the philanthropic sector. So I work for a gas and electric company. We also produce power. And that's a big difference, I think, for anyone looking to say, I really love to work in the community. What does that mean, right? Well, in a corporate setting, what that means is we support our employees as much as we support the community out there. And somehow it has to be relevant to what we do, right? We are a gas and electric utility. We have predominantly a blue-collar workforce. So what does that mean? We support, for instance, STEM education. Why is that important to us? Because, we would like to see more women and minority engineers. That's what we are. We are a company of engineers. We support the environment. We support disaster preparedness and relief, as well as safety. Safety is the #1 issue for this company, and so we support it through our philanthropic giving. Why would we support Junior Achievement? We support Junior Achievement because we want to have citizens with sound business backgrounds, and hopefully maybe one of them or a few of them will be hired by us one day. So on a day-to-day basis, we might be preparing a volunteer event for our volunteers, which has included Junior Achievement. So when Junior Achievement comes into our office, we've already solicited employees who want to come down and get involved and get exposed, and they feel good then about where they work. And hopefully the students will have gotten some benefit from it as well and been exposed to our corporation. So that's an example of some of how, what we do on a daily basis. Working with employees is one constituent. We may work with, communities at large. It might be a city that's really in need of assistance. And so we have, or a region of the state. Like we have a nuclear power plant in South Jersey, down in Salem. We want to make sure we support that community, and where are its strengths and weaknesses, and how do we go about that? And do we work with others? And we do, actually. We do work with other funders. So, we work with various constituencies. We also support the business. So whereas if I worked for a private foundation, I would really just work with nonprofits and perhaps other funders. But working inside a corporate environment, I also have corporate responsibilities. If we are submitting to our BPU, Board of Public Utilities, a request for a rate increase, I will be asked to support that by providing documentation. So there are like a lot of other corporate kind of responsibilities that are required that you wouldn't have if you worked for a nonprofit or you worked for a private foundation. So this makes corporate giving a little bit different.
Thank you for sharing that.
Answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a good distinction to make, for young people as they go forward and think about what they want to do. Understanding the difference between a corporation and a nonprofit, but also how they come together and how they need each other to keep moving. So thank you for sharing. Definitely.
Thank you.
So was your first job in this field? Did you change fields at all?
Truthfully, my first job was with public service, and I started, well, I should back up a little bit. The first job offer I had was with Verizon, was then called New Jersey Bell. And my mother worked for Verizon and had nothing to do with the job that I got. It's just, it was a familiar company to me, so I applied in a completely different area. And the Friday before the Monday I was supposed to start, I thought, I can't work there. If I make a mistake, I don't want to embarrass my mother and whatever that would be. So I called and said, I'm not going to take the job. And my mother said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to walk down the street to the next utility company. So that's what I did. And I got lucky. I got a job. It wasn't the job that I wanted because at that point I just had to get a job. But it got my foot in the door. And I worked in shareholder services. I think it was a very healthy beginning. It actually made me think about getting a master's. My degree was in English. And so it made me realize that perhaps I need to get an MBA. I am in a business environment, even if that's not what I do pursue, the financial side. So, it got my foot in the door and it helped me kind of jettison till I was able to find a position that, was more aligned with my background.
I see. You mentioned, I like the get your foot in the door, right? It wasn't the job that you wanted. It was the job
not at all.
Nice. And once again, you did just mention your education, right? So you majored in English, and you thought about going back to school. Can you describe what your education path looked like a little bit in terms of where your interests were and how that aligned with where you ended up in work post-grad?
So I always had an interest in politics, and I also love to read. I love stories. I love reading stories, listening to stories. I like good storytellers. So that's why I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I majored in English literature, which I don't regret and I really loved. And then I stayed involved in politics. So on a club basis in college, I was involved politically as well as with the student newspaper. I was also involved politically in my own town. So that's how I don't know why I didn't major in political science. I took courses, but I guess I was more drawn to English literature. And then after graduating and after getting a job, that's when I realized that perhaps I needed more than just, an undergraduate degree in English. And I wavered between getting a graduate degree in communications or in an MBA. And I thought, even if I am not going to go into business, I think it would be healthy, since I work in a corporation, to at least understand it. And that's why I got an MBA. So I chose that degree.
Okay, that makes sense. And thank you for sharing that. We get confused sometimes when we think about going to school to get a certain degree and then coming out and working in a whole different field. But as long as the experience is relevant and the knowledge is relevant, and you recognize where you want to go going forward, you can kind of pick up anything and decide, I want to be in politics. I want to be in community service.
That's right.
This is why. So definitely thank you for sharing that. To capture a student's attention, can you tell them something about your path that might surprise them? For example, if you had a job change, an unusual responsibility on the job, something that you didn't see yourself doing necessarily?
Well, yes, actually. As I said, I got my foot in the door, and then within a year, there was a position open in governmental affairs. And so I was fortunate. I got that job, and I loved it. I got to do, it's a much bigger department now than it was then, but because it was much smaller then, we dealt with both federal, state, and local politics. So you really got to see the dynamics of all of that and how different they are and the relationship between those different levels of government. Then I was asked, they expanded the department, and I was asked if I wanted to go with federal affairs, and I did. And I really enjoyed that, and that was a really dynamic time in the company. It was the first time I hired a full-time lobbyist. We established an office in Washington. We established a PAC. I was charged with creating a constituent liaison program in New Jersey. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. We would do trips because we have our nuclear plants. We would actually offer trips to Salem for the congressional staff in Washington via helicopter. In those days, we had a couple of helicopters. So I got to do kind of fun things like that and, bring staff to the nuclear plant and have them tour. And it really gave me really great insight into our business. I got to become very familiar with the operation down there. From there, I went, corporations sometimes they centralize, they decentralize. They take different formats depending upon the time and the need. From there, they decentralized, and I was asked if I would go over to our natural gas shop and do legislative regulatory work. And so I was there for a few years, and then they centralized again. And it was also a downsizing period. So that's where I transitioned to corporate responsibility, where I am now, which is essentially corporate philanthropy. And at first, I did not want to be there. It felt a little bit of a withdrawal from the issues. I mean, it's very dynamic to work with legislation and regulation. You get to know an awful lot about a business, and I have an interest in just understanding our business better, and not just even operating issues, but human resource issues, financial issues. So all of a sudden, we're in this philanthropic area, and that area is more in touch with the nonprofit community and other foundations. It's not as closely tied to the business. On a daily basis, you wouldn't have time to be involved in every legislative or regulatory issue. So that was a big transition for me that took a little while, I have to say. But after about a year or so, I really became, I just started to really enjoy the work and just started to realize, okay, well, that's not part of my life anymore, and this is part of my life. And you look out there and you see the passion of nonprofit leaders and staff. And I will tell you, I think some of these people, if they were in private businesses or on their own small businesses, they would be great successes. They give their lives to causes. So it was very moving for me. And I got to know a lot of these people and felt that I was really helping to support them. And simultaneously, I felt like I was supporting our employees, connecting them. They can come and talk to us about, how do they get involved and just learning more about the state and from a community perspective. So it was a journey that, I didn't expect to be here. It wasn't what I had planned on doing, but I have actually come to love it. And I love it for a whole ton of different reasons. I think people really underestimate the not just the dedication and I think the incredible skill of the people out there, but how technical the field is. It isn't just about giving away money or just getting money. As you know, there's much more to it. I mean, there's communications, there's governance, there's finance, there's all kinds of aspects, a lot of rules to this, So I really developed an appreciation for all that went into making a successful nonprofit, as well as supporting or developing a successful nonprofit portfolio.
Yeah, so you really touch on, doing impactful work within the community and for civic society, but also finding the balance between something that fulfills yourself and something that you feel good about doing, and being able to get behind a mission or get behind a certain work day just because you recognize it's something that you can actually get behind. So that's powerful. Marion, they say, time is one of the most valuable things you can give. And as you know, managing, the philanthropic, there's PSEG. So, we really do appreciate everyone here at Junior Achievement. Appreciate you taking the time to, be a part of this initiative and share some of your insight with us. And we'll be speaking with you in the future.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part, Tony.
I was just saying, it was a pleasure speaking with you and appreciate you giving the time. And we know time is very valuable.
It is, but I really believe that, I remember being in high school and not knowing what direction to take things in. I didn't know where to go. So, you just follow the path, I think, that's before you, look around and see what else there is. And sometimes life takes you on a pretty good journey. I mean, I've been fortunate. I mean, if I could just take the time to tell you about a couple of things that I think have really been, I just really felt good about. Working in this role sometimes allows you to really develop something that wasn't there before, and I like the creativity of that. So for instance, during Sandy, even though we support the American Red Cross, for some reason, and I think it was because they were restructuring, we couldn't find anybody on the ground, to work with. And that was a major lesson for me. As a here I am a funder, and I know they're out there and they're doing good work, but when we needed to marry our operations with them, our operating groups didn't want to set up water and ice stations, in a town that perhaps the American Red Cross was there. So after that was over, with the help of our operations staff, I figured out, how do we bring together the groups in the state that need to triage? And that includes the nonprofit organizations like the American Red Cross, New Jersey VOAD, Salvation Army, numbers of them, and as well as the electric, the gas, the water, and the communications utilities, and the government workers. And we managed to create a meeting down at the Rock in Trenton, regional organization. I know I'm going to mess it up, ROIC, but it's really where the state police are. And when there is a major disaster, that's where everybody goes. So there's a seat actually for a utility person from each utility, for the state police, for the governor, for all these different people. But we brought all of ourselves down there, and we said, we have to understand how we triage. And so the companies went and spoke, and then the nonprofits also spoke about how they triage, and as did government. And from there, we were able to develop a very strong relationship. And I'm proud to say that PSEG then was one of the main funders of the establishment of NJVOAD, Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters. That made me feel really good. The fact that we could bring together the business community, the government, and the nonprofit services that really do support the state in these kinds of trouble, times and trouble. I've also been able to, in this role, be creative and establish an employee crisis fund. So when we have employees who sometimes have terrible things happen to them, some of them, just this year, we've had 3 employees whose houses burned to the ground. We've had an employee who actually died. She's the employee, but her husband went as an emergency responder and died of COVID, and she was left with small children. So through the Community Foundation of New Jersey, we are able to provide grants to our employees. I feel really good about having been able to create something that helps our employees, just as I was able to create something with others, to help the state. So if there's something I can say about being in this kind of role, it's that I do think, people say, are you bored? You could never be bored because there's just so much to create. And I would suggest if anybody's interested in philanthropy, think in terms of you have trade associations that support philanthropy. You've got corporate philanthropy. You've got private foundations like a Robert Wood Johnson or Geraldine R. Dodge. And then you've got the nonprofit sector. And, find your place there. Where are you most comfortable and feel that you could really do good in the world? And there are great resources like the Center for Nonprofit Corporations or the Support Center for Nonprofit Corporations or Associations, the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers, Philanthropy New York. Comb their websites, look at the job positions that you see posted. And I have people call me all the time. And I would tell students, reach out. And sometimes it won't be, the first person, but it might be the third person that's willing to talk to you. So anyway, those were some of the questions you had, I thought, or some of the other in things that you were looking for, information that you were looking for, Johnny. So I don't know if that's helpful, but.
No, it's all good insight. It's all good,
Okay.
perspective for students who, especially now in this time of innovation and change, to understand, things are not so one-dimensional. There's a lot of different ways I can get to where I want. There's a lot of different ways I can create different things. And I don't need to feel rushed or any sort of stress behind not knowing where to go. So don't worry about that. It's all good insight and
Good. Okay.
reflection. So I do want to say thank you one more time. Right?
Thank you.
It's very appreciated. And, we'll be definitely keeping in touch with you and keep you in the loop with what's going on here at Junior Achievement.
Thank you. And I have yet to get down to Edison, and Catherine has invited me. So once